Ah, it's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Yo, what is up, everybody? I hope you guys are doing well. I'm doing pretty good over here. I can't really complain too much. Got a few things I want to talk about as usual. My list here is pretty small, though, so it's not going to be a giant list of things. I'll definitely be looking at the chat and seeing what you guys have to talk about, too. Remember, if you guys do have questions or things that you want me to cover, feel free to throw them in the chat. Put them in caps lock. It helps me to see them a little bit better. But I'll admit half the time stuff goes by and I can't even see it. You know, that's one thing that I do have to say. If I had YouTube's ear, same thing with Facebook and all the other platforms, but YouTube especially, somehow I'd like a better way to interact with people on live streams, because when people ask questions, they just get lost in the chat, you know, and then it's just kind of confusing. Like, it'd be kind of cool if YouTube had a feature where they would have like a question thing or something like that, and it would pop up in a different spot on my screen so that way you can actually see questions. But I mean, you know, that's kind of the reason why I say if you guys have things that you want me to cover, you can always email me during the week, different things like that. And I try to go through my emails, but I'll even admit that, you know, stuff gets lost in my emails too. So it's kind of interesting. You know, I run into, well, before I go off on a tangent, and like I usually do, let me start this stream out right, okay? My name is Chris, for those that are new to the stream. I know it seems like we get new people every single time, whether it be on Facebook or on YouTube. But I'm just a normal service technician here in Southern California, run a small business, have a few employees, started making videos for my employees, and it was more of a training aid. And I found the need after I started making the videos. I never really intended on making them public, but eventually I did. And then when I hit the public button, I started getting questions, you know, whether it be emails, comments, different things. And I'd find myself just completely addicted to my phone, just staring at my phone all the time. And then the live streams were born. But to be fair, who was it that I was talking to the other day? Someone gave me, right about the time that I was thinking about doing a Q&A live stream, someone in like on a Facebook chat or something like that. I know I said it recently on the Overtime shows. One of our regular viewers told me that I should start doing, oh, it was Michael Hausch, actually, I think, who's very active in the social media community, HVAC school group, HVAC overtime group, the Hausch, what is Hausch's Facebook page called? I don't know. But anyways, Michael Hausch, he's a cool dude. But he was the one I think that had commented, you know, hey, you should start doing live streams. And I was thinking about it, but then he kind of gave me the encouragement. Regardless, here I am. I do these. It's been a couple years now. I think I actually started making videos in 2017, actually November of 2017. So 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So I think we're 5 years in right now is about what it is. And then the live streams, I think, are about 4.5 years because I think I started them about 6 months after. But thank you to everybody that's in here. Wow, that's really awesome, man. I really am thankful that you became a channel supporter, True Fellowship. Thank you very much, bud. And I know that we were emailing back and forth, so that's really awesome. Thank you. All right, I'm looking through the chat right now, seeing what's up. Hello, my viewers, says Jason Johnson. That is a Dr. Zarkloff reference. If anybody doesn't know who Dr. Z is, you need to go back to the old school YouTube HVAC groups or pages. Just look up Dr. Z HVAC. It'll come up, Dr. Zarkloff. He was one of the original YouTubers that was making HVAC content. You know, there was a lot of people that were making HVAC content well before I started coming into the game. And, you know, my content's questionable at that too. So, hey, I know. And, you know, for the people out there that send me the emails and stuff, I can promise you that my worst critic is me. Almost, you know, it's funny. Someone sent me an email, or no, it was a YouTube comment, and they said, your channel is dead. I'm unsubscribing. I'm never going to watch another video. Your videos are boring. And I didn't, but I wanted to respond with a guy, tell me about it, bro. I edit these same videos and I'm bored out of my mind. Like, I truly am bored. I need to find a way to do something different because I am just completely getting bored. If I have to edit another iced up walk-in freezer service call, oh my gosh, I'm gonna, yeah, I don't even know. It's just so funny because every time I make a video, I have to watch that video probably 3 times in editing. So if it's a 40-minute video, I've watched that 40-minute video probably 3 times. Oh, man. I am my own worst critic. Trust me. Okay. I see a lot of great people in here. Ike's in here. Ike's been a channel supporter for a long time now. What's up, bud? Yeah, I did. Yeah. PC's been running good. Everything's been going good, man. So hello to everybody out in Facebook too. I am streaming on Facebook, so that's really awesome. So as usual, want to cover a couple things, but I think that's enough talking about me. And something that I wanted to start off, you know, why do I do this? Why do I put this content out on YouTube? Okay. Part of it is I like interaction with people. Okay. I mean, plain and simple. You know, I put stuff out, people email me, I get to have conversations with people. It's really cool. The other thing to the whole content creation is inadvertently, you know, my goal when I first started making these videos was not to go out there and be the best educator, the best service technician, because I'm neither of those. Small platform, a decently sized platform. And for whatever reason, you guys keep coming back and watching the videos and the live streams and different things. And to be frank, like, you know, I'm super thankful. I guess to be frank wouldn't be the right term, but I am very humbled by it all. It's awesome. But, you know, I just like sharing the little bit of knowledge that I have. And I'm very honest and try to show as many of the mistakes that I make. Now, when I say I try to show as many mistakes as possible, it's not that everybody should screw up. What I'm trying to show is that I'm human. Okay, I am a normal service technician. I make mistakes, and I think it's really important because it's very easy when people make content to edit out their mistakes. Okay, and I try to leave them in as much as possible because I try to address them, right? So that's, people will email me and they say, I don't ever watch the closing words of your video. I don't want to watch your videos anymore because the closing words are boring. Well, then don't watch them, number one, or just watch the video and not the closing words. But for a few people that do watch to the end, in the closing words, I usually address the mistakes or different things that I feel that I need to address, because, hey, I didn't go in depth enough about this or whatever. And, I don't take offense. If you guys have criticism or anything like that, feel free to shoot me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com. I mean, as long as you're not a jerk about it and I can learn something, go for it. If you know a better way to do something that I showed in my videos, please send me an email. And if it's relevant, I'll address it. I'll discuss it. I've done it several times where I've come into these live streams and said, I made a mistake. This person pointed it out. And, and I grow from mistakes, and so does everybody else, okay? Henrik, thank you very, very much for that super chat or channel donation. That's really awesome, bud. What is my hardest service call, if there is any? I'm going to write that on my list right now, and I'll think about that for a few minutes and finish talking about what I was going on. So, hardest service call. And I'll try to cover that. So, something that I did want to cover, and I'm probably going off of whatever tangent I was going on right now, and I'm changing the subject again, is that I have a lot of viewers that are from other countries, okay? Henrik, I think maybe you are, and I know there's a lot of other people, and that's really awesome. It is really cool to think that people in other countries want to watch this content. But something that I realize sucks about my videos is that when other people in other countries do watch them, a lot of the times the unit conversions, or there is no conversions, right? Because I'm talking about everything in American terms. So we're using American standards, okay? And oftentimes that won't translate over, and it'll kind of confuse people. I know that people eventually catch on and they figure it out. I would love to be able to do something about that. Honestly, I just don't even know how to approach it. I'd love to have unit conversions, or when I say something, have a pop-up that comes up and shows different conversions or something. That would be awesome. But it's like almost impossible because this channel is just me. Nobody, I mean, every once in a while I have my daughter come in and help me with something, but I mean, that's very rare too. This is just me on the video. So I edit the videos all by myself. I don't have time, and I'm running a normal business and having a normal family. My wife does come in and help me with like some of the merchandise sales and different things, but this is all me. I mean, so I don't have a way. If anybody out there has advice or different ways that they think that things can get better as far as making it easier for other countries and different people, even other languages. Hey, I've even thought about having my videos dubbed, having them transcribed in other languages. I think that'd be awesome. Have a HVACR Videos Mexico and different channels. Like, it's a cool thing. I'm probably talking about things I shouldn't talk about, but it is what it is, So if y'all have advice, please feel free to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. Another thing, too, is tomorrow is November 15th. And if you are local in Southern California and you happen to have time, I will be at the iHacky Trade Show in Pasadena, California. I'm taking the day off work. Going to go down to the trade show and hang out, see friends, meet new people, see all the new stuff. I mean, the iHacky Trade Show is nothing like AHR. It's a super, super small show, but still, it's a really cool, great local event. And I've already gotten several confirmations from great people that I know that are going to be at the show. So if any of you happens to be local in Southern California, feel free, stop by the show. It's free. I think you just got to like fill out a little ticket thing and get into the show or whatever. But, if you see me walking around the show, say what's up. Oftentimes I wear asshole on my forehead, and so when I'm focused on something, I tend to, people don't want to mean. I think I'm a nice person. You just gotta just get past the whole super focused look that I have on my face and talk to me. So And but just stop me and say what's up. All right. I'm looking through my chat right now. All right, cool. So yeah, definitely the iHacky trade show. So stop me and say what's up. I will also be at the AHR trade show in Atlanta. What is it, in February, I think, or the end of January? And I actually just registered for the HVAC Tactical Awards. Ben Poole from HVAC Tactical and Solderweld, again, are putting on the HVAC Tactical Awards. It's a great, great little thing they have going on where they're recognizing cool people in the industry for things that normally wouldn't get recognized. Really, really cool event. And every year it's evolving and getting bigger and bigger. So I actually just bought my tickets today. Myself and Brett Wetzel from the Advanced Refrigeration podcast are going to be going. So, but yeah, I'll be at the AHR trade show too. I'll announce that a ton and everything. So, all right, let's see what else we got going on in the chat. See what I'm missing. Hire helpers just for the channel. It sounds like a great idea. Your wife makes a killer apple cobbler. I'm reading through the chat. Am I going to be at the trade show tomorrow? George Walls. Yep. I think you asked that just before I started talking about it. But yep, I'll be at the iHacky trade show in Pasadena. So if you're coming, make sure you stop me, find me. I'll be walking around. I'll probably announce it on social media and different things tomorrow too. So reading through here. All right. Oh, is Laska in here too? Oh yeah, Laska did show up. What's up, Laska? How's it going, man? Everybody was wondering where you were because we haven't seen you in a while. So, all right. Is my troubleshooting process for walk-ins different during the winter or when it's cold out? Well, sure. And I'm going to segue that into a question because I had someone email me. Adrian actually had emailed me asking about an issue he was having with a walk-in freezer. So first and foremost, Adrian, I'm not going to address just your question. I'm going to talk about walk-in equipment and my troubleshooting process in general, and I'm sure you'll get something from it, okay? So first and foremost, when you are working on refrigeration equipment, it is so important that you understand what you're working on. You understand the ins and outs of how the control strategy works, how the refrigeration piping is piped, and what happens, the sequence of operation, okay, is very important because it makes it so difficult for us as technicians to troubleshoot. One of the biggest myths, misconception is the right word. One of the misunderstood things about refrigeration, okay, it is ingrained in our heads when we're in trade school, when we're being taught by senior technicians, when we're reading books, that you need to look at your system vitals, and that is very important, okay? Superheat and subcooling are very important, but it's also drilled in our heads that we use superheat and subcooling for charging of refrigeration and air conditioning equipment. While there is truth in that, there is also some things that you don't necessarily pay attention to in certain situations, if that makes sense, okay? When you're working on an air conditioner and you have a fixed orifice metering device, right? It has a piston or actuator metering devices or whatever, and it's just a package unit, okay? And you want to charge the system. Your best bet is to weigh in the manufacturer's charge, okay? But if you can't weigh in the manufacturer's charge, what you can do is you can use a method called target superheat. That's where it looks at the indoor conditions of the air going across the evaporator, and it can give you a superheat number that you're aiming for, and you add or remove refrigerant to kind of obtain that superheat number. So that's very common on air conditioning equipment, okay? But there's also times that you're working on an air conditioning equipment or air conditioning unit, and it's a heat pump, okay? Well, charging heat pumps is a little difficult, and usually you're recommended to weigh in the charge when you're working on heat pumps. So the point I'm trying to make is, while there is truth in the fact that you should use superheat and subcooling when you're charging, it's not always the same in certain situations, okay? When it comes to refrigeration equipment that has a receiver is a liquid storage vessel. Receiver systems or receivers in the system when you typically have an expansion valve, okay? It's very rare that you're going to see a receiver on a fixed orifice metering device or a capillary tube, but never say never. There's weird stuff out there, okay? But when you have a receiver, it typically means that you're going to have an expansion valve too. The receiver is there to have extra refrigerant when it's needed for the expansion valve to operate, okay? Because an expansion valve is going to react to the temperature in the system. It has a sensing bulb, and that sensing bulb opens and closes or puts more pressure on a pin that opens and closes the valve, so it reacts to the system temperatures, okay, the evaporator coil temperature. But, okay, that receiver is a storage vessel. When you have a system with a receiver on a walk-in freezer typically, subcooling is not a metric that we are going to use for charging, nor is superheat, okay? So I'm just talking in general. And again, superheat is something that we pay attention to and possibly adjust when our system is down to temperature, okay? But we pay attention to it because if we're flooding back to the compressor on startup and we're looking at our compressor amps and the amps are going high, well, then maybe we need to do something. We need to control the superheat a little bit. It's flooding back. There's a problem, okay? So there's always variables. There's always things that may come up. But the basic principle is that when you have a refrigeration system that has a receiver, whether it be a walk-in freezer or a walk-in cooler, you need a solid column of liquid going to your expansion valve, all right? We don't really pay any attention to subcooling. Well, I shouldn't say you don't pay any attention. You don't use subcooling as a charging metric, okay? There's some caveats in there, though, because if you have 45 degrees subcooling, well, something's going on there, okay? Typically, you're overcharged or something's happening. There's no room for that refrigerant to kind of store, and it's just backing up, increasing the head pressure. That can be a problem, okay? But for the most part, subcooling is not something we use because it's a very difficult thing to measure on refrigeration systems, and the subcooling will change, okay? As the refrigerant's being used, as it's backing up, as it's being reduced, it might change, okay? So on a refrigeration system, when we are charging it, first off, we need to understand exactly what's going on. The next thing is that we have a properly evacuated system. We've done all the proper practices. We've changed the dryers, all this good stuff, right? And we're getting ready to charge the system. We're going to add the refrigerant into the high side, dump it directly into the receiver with the system turned off. Dump as much gas as you can, not going over what you think the total charge will be, into the receiver. Then I turn the system on. This is how it should be done. Turn the system on and let it run, and then add any extra refrigerant that you need slowly into the suction side while the system's running, trying to maintain or trying not to get liquid into the compressor. So you're just carefully metering it through your gauges. Although something I will say, you know, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that modern compressors can actually handle more liquid than was ingrained in our head. I'm not saying that you should just go dump liquid into the suction side, but most reciprocating, at least like the Copeland and the Tecumseh compressors, I believe they actually have like an accumulator-like device built into the compressor that prevents slugging. That's a whole nother thing. But scroll compressors, they can do a pretty good job. But still, you don't want to dump liquid into them, but meter that refrigerant into the system. But subcooling is really not a metric as long as it's not going through the roof that I'm looking for, okay? You are not going to charge to 10 degrees subcooling on a refrigeration system that has a receiver. Let's go back real quick. What does subcooling mean to us? Subcooling means that it is 100% liquid, okay? That's one of the terms, right? So if you have a degree of subcooling, that means that it's liquid, okay? But then why do we charge to 10 degrees subcooling, okay? I'm asking the chat right now. Why do we charge, and answer in the chat if you guys know, why do we charge to 10 degrees of subcooling? What's the point? Why do we go to 10 degrees? And let's see if the chat has any answers. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Just put it in there, okay? Is subcooling always going to stay at 10 degrees? If you charge it at 10 degrees in the middle of the winter, in the middle of the summer, is it going to be 10 degrees, you know, when it's running too? Okay. 10 degrees is a nice number to get you beer can cold suction line. Hey, that's a pretty good answer there, Alaska. See, exactly what they were saying in the chat when they said they missed you, because they miss your one-liners. And you truly do have the best one-liners when you're in a chat, Alaska. So you're going to ammonia. Okay, so manufacturer says so. To be sure you have a full column of liquid. Yes, okay. So you guys are getting the right idea, right? But understand something, okay? 10 degrees of subcooling is actually like a gross estimate to make sure that we have enough refrigerant when we're, this is when you're charging to 10 degrees subcooling, okay? Because the idea is if you have 1 degree of subcooling, you have a solid column of liquid. So then why make it all the way to 10? Well, what happens when the load on the system changes? What happens when you need more refrigerant? So they typically will charge to 10 degrees, 16 degrees subcooling to make sure that you have enough refrigerant for when the expansion valve needs it all. So that subcooling number will actually go down as your system's operating on some systems, okay? Now let's get back to the refrigeration systems. I was talking more air conditioning on the subcooling idea, but when it comes to refrigeration systems, we don't use subcooling other than looking as a metric for a gross overcharge, okay? So when I'm charging to a clear sight glass, I'm not really paying attention to subcooling. I may have my gauges on there, and if I see it going really high, then I'll start to get concerned, but it's not anything you're going to use when you're charging. So you're going to charge to a solid column of liquid, and then after you get the system operating and close, being down to temperature, that's when you're going to go in and start adjusting your expansion valve. But before you adjust your expansion valve, you always want to make sure that the strainer is clear. Typically, you should have an expansion valve that has a removable strainer on the top of the valve. When the system's pumped down, pull that strainer out, make sure it's clear, because people can go wrenching on expansion valves and realize that that's not the problem, okay? I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if you install a properly sized expansion valve on a system that was properly designed, and you put the right power head on that valve, you really shouldn't have to adjust that valve with a brand new valve, okay? They typically come set for the typical superheat that you would see on a refrigeration or a walk-in freezer system. Now, I realize that sometimes we do have to make adjustments, but honestly, I don't make very many adjustments on expansion valves when I replace them. They really don't. Sometimes you may have to tweak it just a little bit. So how do we know that our system's working? Like when it comes time to adjusting an expansion valve, right? So you're starting up a walk-in freezer and it's running and it's coming down to temp. You have a clear sight glass, right? And this is where, it would be a good idea. And this is where it'd be a good idea to pay attention to subcooling just to make sure that your subcooling's not going super high. Okay. That'll help you to know if you have too much gas in the system. But really, I'm not looking for 10 degrees subcooling. I mean, just as long as you have some subcooling, you have refrigerant in there, right? You have enough refrigerant, you have a solid column of liquid. That's all that I care about. You'll see different subcooling numbers on refrigeration equipment, just kind of going off on that subject when it comes to, what number subcooling do you want. You'll like on older systems, you might see 3 degrees subcooling. You might see 2 degrees subcooling. On some of the newer systems, they actually are more efficient and they add extra subcooling loops. So you actually will see measurable subcooling like 8, 7, 8, 9, 10 degrees sometimes on some of the newer refrigeration systems. But again, I'm not using that as a charging metric, okay? It's just something that I'm paying attention to, and I'm charging by clearing the sight glass with everything operating properly, okay? So understand also that a clear sight glass only means that you have a solid column of liquid at the point that it's installed, okay? And also be able to understand between an empty sight glass and a clear sight glass, because people can really be confused by an empty and clear sight glass, okay? But that's where, and if you really want to know places where subcooling can help you, again, when you're charging a system and you see really high subcooling, okay, there's something going on there, right? Or when you're trying to differentiate between a clear and an empty sight glass, subcooling is a metric that can help you, because if you put your temp clamps on there and you don't see any subcooling and you're suspecting that it was empty, well, maybe it is because you don't have any subcooling. You should just have some subcooling is really what you should have. So as far as that goes, okay, and I know I'm going off on all different subjects here, but when it comes to the walk-in freezers, the next step that I'm going to take after I charge the system and it's running, we're going to watch the system come down in temperature. We're going to put an amp clamp on there. We're looking at the compressor current, making sure it's not going over on its current ratings, right? We don't want to overheat that compressor. Then as the box gets close to set point, usually within 5, sometimes 10 degrees of set point, then it's a safe time to go ahead and start adjusting the evaporator superheat, okay? Now that's the next step. When we're testing superheat for an expansion valve adjustment, right? Or we're setting an expansion valve superheat, we're making sure the system's operating, we need to be checking the superheat at the evaporator, okay? Because there's two places, well, there's multiple places you can check superheat, but there's two places that it really matters. That's at the evaporator and at the compressor, okay? We want the lowest superheat number we can get without flooding refrigerant back to the compressor. We want to make sure that that refrigerant's not coming out of that evaporator coil before it boils off, right? But we want to get low superheat, as low as we can, really, right? So typically what I see on my systems is about 6 to 8 degrees on walk-in freezers, but sometimes you may see lower, okay? And then typically 8 to 10 degrees, sometimes up to 15 degrees on walk-in coolers. What you will see, though, as far as superheat numbers, is you'll see manufacturers actually getting braver and braver, especially when they have electronic expansion valves, and they'll bring that superheat number down. Again, we aim, we're trying to get that superheat as low as possible without flooding back to the compressor. And with a thermostatically controlled expansion valve, we tend to be kind of we set our superheat a little bit high to be safe because we want to make sure we don't have any refrigerant flooding back, okay? So electronic expansion valves give us the ability to get that superheat because we can maintain within a very small margin to get it a lot lower to make our system more efficient, okay? So you'll see that. But once you get the system close to being down to temp, then if you decide you need to make a superheat adjustment, that's when you'd make a superheat adjustment. But I said already, it's really important that we make sure we're dealing with evaporator superheat. So to obtain evaporator superheat, what you want is you want the suction pressure of the refrigerant leaving the evaporator coil. You want to take a pressure reading at the evaporator coil and a temperature reading at the exit of the evaporator coil. And you convert the refrigerant pressure to a saturation temperature, subtract the two, your line temperature, the saturation temperature, and you get your evaporator superheat, okay? So make sure when you're checking your evaporator superheat that you are getting the pressure from down at the evaporator. Now, there is times that I can get pressure from up at the compressor, but you have to be very careful. If your system has a pressure drop for some strange, odd reason, right? Or if you have no insulation on your suction line and it's absorbing a lot of heat, the suction line in the attic, the superheat at the compressor can be a totally different number. The pressure at the compressor can be a totally different number because of pressure drops or different things like that. So you've got to be very careful. So you want to be checking your evaporator superheat. You want to get suction pressure at the evaporator if you can. Sometimes you can't. And that can lead to a lot of confusing things. At the beginning of this rant, I said it's so important that we understand the intricacies of the system we're working on, okay? We want to make sure that we want to make sure that we understand how everything's working, because then if something weird happens and we don't recognize it, some serious problems can happen with the system. So when you're working on refrigeration equipment, you don't want to be winging it, okay? You need to have an understanding of what's going on. It's very important. So I don't know if I answered any of your questions, Adrian, and I know a few other people asked about the walk-in refrigeration equipment. I apologize. I usually go off on weird tangents. Hopefully I answered something in there, but let's make sure you're getting the evaporator superheat correct. Let's make sure that you don't have restricted liquid lines or anything like that, plugged up strainers. Let's make sure we're checking all of that stuff and we're understanding the total sequence of the system, okay? So if I didn't answer anybody's questions, again, feel free to shoot me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com. Okay, so it's AWEF with the receiver. You didn't order the equipment. Oh, wait, I'm getting in here. Just curious. Let me see. I'm going up here. Plenty of space above box. You can't stand up. I'm reading through. Okay, Mike B says, you have a new build, 3 walk-ins, 2 coolers, 1 freezer. The condensers are on top of the box inside the building. Would you still charge the receiver to 75%? Mike B. So, if you have an indoor condensing unit, then you have no need to have flooded head pressure control valves and winter charge in the system. Okay, there's no need for it if you have an indoor condensing unit and it's in a space where the temperatures are maintained. Now, I think I read down in the bottom that it's AWEF compliant equipment and they're pre-built condensing units that maybe came with head pressure control valves and different things on it. If that's the case, you know, if you can't remove the components, so I guess the question would be, would I still add the flooded charge? I mean, it really depends on the customer, okay? If I know that it's my customer and nobody else is going to be servicing that equipment, I guess there's a possibility I wouldn't put the flooded charge in there. But honestly, I think it's probably best to go ahead and do so, because if someone else walks in behind you and they see a head pressure control valve, they may not be thinking straight, you know, and they may, who knows, that may confuse other people. So that's an interesting question, Mike B. Again, I guess it just depends on the customer. But theoretically, I mean, where he's getting at here is that if it's installed inside the building, the temperature of the building's, you know, maintained at a constant temperature, it's more than likely not going to get below 60 degrees where the condensing unit is. So there's never going to be a point at which the head pressure control valve's even going to bypass. Head pressure control valve is simply there to maintain a pressure differential so that way your expansion valve can work properly in low ambient conditions. Easiest way to understand it, okay? So, but with the head pressure control valve, it requires extra refrigerant. You know, another thing too, while I'm going off on this, I get a lot of people that reach out to me and say, stop talking about winter charge and flooded charge and don't call it that, and stop talking about head pressure control valves. I talk about them too much. No, I don't talk about them too much, because I still get a lot of comments where people don't understand how they work. So I'm sorry if I'm boring people, but I'm trying to help people with knowledge. So, you know, feel free to skip that part of the video or move on if it annoys you that I talk about head pressure control valves so much. But unfortunately, they're one of the most misunderstood components in a refrigeration system, that and the expansion valve. You know, head pressure control valves are often misdiagnosed. A lot of people think they're horrible. I've even had local supply houses to me, having conversations with them. And I go in there and I start talking with the branch managers about this new equipment and the new things we have to do. And I've had a couple different supply houses tell me this, that brand new condensing units, they'll take the top off and they'll cut they'll clip the tip on the dome of the head pressure control valve from the supply house, and they won't even sell it to their customer with that power head or with the head pressure control valve active in the system. That's a horrible thing for a supply house to do. They're so misdiagnosed and misunderstood, and they're really not that difficult. So that's why I talk about them so much. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think it's really important to share the little bit of knowledge that I have. So let's see what else we got going on in the chat. Sorry if I'm missing anything here. Winter charge is super important, especially nowadays. Yes, very, very much important. So, my thoughts as well. Just wanted my opinion. Okay, Mike B. Yeah, very. I mean, you know, that's just my thing. I mean, honestly, if it was my customer, I probably wouldn't put the flooded charge in there. Why do we call it a winter charge? Okay. Why do we call it a flooded charge? Well, technically, it's a flooded charge because you're flooding the condenser. Why we call it a winter charge? That's not my term. That's, if you look in all the old training manuals, it'll say winter charge. Okay. My assumption is because, you know, that was the extra refrigerant needed for the head pressure control valve to flood the condenser. So that's my assumption as to why they call it a winter charge. It's pretty logical, right? So reading through here, you wish every house with a central AC you had the option to turn to get outside air through your vents. It's underrated. Nathan, it is underrated, but it's very interesting what I'm learning about home performance. And again, I'm just scratching the surface as I'm replacing the air conditioner in my house, and I'm just doing a little bit of research. And again, I do not understand anything, okay? I understand the smallest percentage of home performance, but you know, originally when I was replacing the air conditioner in my house or designing it in my head, I was thinking that I wanted some really cool economizer feature to my system where I bring in outside air and, you know, using economizer controls from like commercial equipment. Like I wanted all this different stuff. And I've learned that's actually not the best thing in the world, because when you're building high performance homes, right, which I don't have, but when you're trying to make your home more energy efficient and with clean air, what you actually find is the outside air sometimes can be a lot worse than the inside air. And there's different times of the day that maybe, you know, like I live in Southern California and we haven't had it in a couple years, but there was a good year or two where we had a lot of wildfires and there was always smoke outside. And, you know, it's not necessarily safe to breathe that. Even if you put like a filter that makes the smell go away, if there's particles in the air and different things, that can cause problems. That can cause lung irritation. So fresh air is important, but it needs to be cleaned fresh air. So that way, you know, it's not always 100% safer to just bring outside air into your home. What happens if there's high moisture content in that air? And, or what happens if it's really warm air? Who knows? And it causes condensation, different things like that. So outside air is good when it's clean, for sure. So, let me see what else we got going on in the chat. You guys get some shitty outside air with all the fires. Yeah, exactly. Most residential HVAC is not there. They all have is exhaust fans, no intake. It should be, yeah. I agree, Dale, that there should be fresh, you know, outside air coming into the home for sure. Because if you build tight homes without outside air, you actually can start getting people sick, you know, suffocating them with reduced oxygen levels and different things. But, yeah, you definitely need some fresh air. And I'm going to have fresh air at my house. It's just not going to be as much as I thought is all. But fresh air is very important, okay? And, you know, the codes and different things that we have for fresh air in buildings, it's not quite there with residential. It's getting there. We've had to do, you know, so much outside air for every person in the building in the commercial side for many, many years. But on the residential side, it's just barely starting to become a code. I think in California, it's been in the last maybe 5 years, it became a residential code to bring in outside air. But, you know, it's slowly spreading across the United States where they're requiring people to have fresh air. And it is an important thing, I think. So, how often do I see 2 condensing units for 1 walk-in? John Deere fan, that's very rare. I have seen it. Typically, it's going to be for redundant systems. It's not, I mean, depending on the smaller walk-ins, it's not a very smart idea to have multiple condensing units running the walk-in on smaller ones. I'm talking like 3,000 square feet or less walk-ins. Big industrial ones, it's pretty common because on the big industrial ones, even though it's one common occupied space where they're cooling, whether it be, you know, food storage, so it's low, ultra low temps and stuff, it's pretty common for them to have multiple condensing units. Redundancy is very, very important and also a very good thing. So I've dealt with some hospitals before that had redundancy built into the refrigeration system. So they actually had 2 separate refrigeration systems and only one would run, and they would stage them and do like a lead lag setup. And then, you know, different times like that. Or sometimes one of the other ones would just run at low speed and only come on when, you know, there's a high demand. There's all kinds of different setups on that. But I don't deal with it very often. So let's see what else we got going on in the chat. Need oxygen for tight houses. Exactly. And I'm getting the air sealing down on my house. Definitely not is... I'm getting it lower, better than it was. But I've also realized just the little bit of the home performance stuff that I've been researching. Again, there's so many smart people out there, and I'm very fortunate to be able to lean on them. But, you know, there's a lot of misinformation about home performance, but then also there's just so many intricacies in it. It's so interesting to see, you know, how much we don't know about our homes. It's really, really intriguing to see how much we don't know and how much, like me, I'm assuming that other people are like me too. You know, I've been living in my home, and one of my biggest problems is something that I just never really thought about. I'm not an idiot, but one of my biggest problems, and I already said it in my first video for my home project that I'm doing. If you guys don't know, I'm making a series. I'm just filming the process of me changing the air conditioner in my house. I'm taking my time. It's super slow. I filmed one video and I just showed my house and the things that I knew I was doing wrong and holes in the walls that I've just dealt with for years, different stuff like that. But I'm working through the process, but I'm learning so much. Now I'm on the building side where I'm measuring the air leakage in my house, and I was intrigued to know how common it is to have extremely leaky homes, you know, and it's interesting. So the home performance stuff is fun. It's something that I'm very intrigued by learning more about it. So let's see what else we got going on in the chat. You have like 3 weeks a year where economizer is even feasible, yet they still have them. And yet it's still a code, might be. So for us out here in SoCal, yeah, we only have a few weeks of the year where it's cool enough outside to actually open an economizer and cool down a building, or even my house. There's not a lot of time for it because we don't know what cold is here, and our winter, are warm compared to the rest of the country. So it's just moderate outside. Now in the summer, oh my gosh, all hell's breaking loose. But all right, let's see what else we got in the chat. Or is it, or are new houses being built cheap? New houses are being built cheap too, yeah. But you have a lot of buildings currently using water source economizers. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. So how does beer glycol compare to a refrigeration system? Well, beer glycol is combined with the refrigeration system, okay? So beer glycol is just a way of, it wouldn't be very efficient if we ran refrigeration lines through a chase and cooled beer lines. It wouldn't be an efficient thing. And there would just be a lot of issues with that, right? So if we just ran a suction line or a couple suction lines in a loop with beer lines, it's just not practical. So a smart thing that they did was they have a secondary fluid, glycol. They keep it in a reservoir. It has some sort of a heat exchanger in it. The newer ones have like flat plate heat exchangers, and that's where the heat transfers happens. So you have refrigerant on one side and you have glycol on the other side, and they just pump that glycol into the lines, and it doesn't go into the beer. It just sits in a conduit with beer all around it. It has usually like sometimes 2 lines and in and out, or sometimes 2 sets of glycol lines that'll cool that channel of beer lines. So there may be 10, 15 beer lines in there, and there's like, 2 glycol lines. And then they insulate it really well and they run it underground. So it is a refrigeration system that has refrigerant in it too. It just uses the glycol as a secondary heat transfer fluid, basically, is all that they do. So lots of buildings you work on have makeup airs. That's right. Let's see. I'm going here through the chat, seeing what I'm missing. Perlick beer cooler. That's right. Yeah. Henrik, I probably still haven't answered your question. I'm going through my list right now. So another question that I have is a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot. I've had this question probably 4 times, and I've actually had this brought up to me as a service technician in my career too. So someone had sent me an email asking me if it was safe to leave an ice machine running overnight in a restaurant. Okay. And while my gut instinct is to say, why is that even a question, right? I guess that there is, it's common sense to me to know that it's safe to leave an ice machine on overnight, okay? Again, assuming that it's working properly, okay? But I'm kind of surprised by that question, and no offense to the person that asked it, no offense to anybody, but it's just interesting. It's difficult for me to understand that question because it's common sense to me, right? But it's not common sense to you, and that's okay, okay? But is it safe to leave an ice machine on overnight? Yes. If it's a modern ice machine and it's working properly and nobody's done any weird stuff to it, yeah, it's safe to leave your ice machine running overnight. In fact, your ice machine is meant to run 24 hours a day. If you have a Hoshizaki ice machine that is a KM 1340 MRH, right? A 1,300 pound machine, meaning that it produces 1,300 pounds of ice in a 24-hour period. That's the important thing to understand, okay? So it needs to be able to run for 24 hours to be able to produce that 1,300 pounds of ice. So yes, it is safe to leave your ice machine running, assuming that everything's working properly. The odds of your ice machine catching on fire because you left it running overnight are super, super tiny. I mean, you'd have to talk to a mathematician to be able to figure out, or statistician? I don't know how you say that, but a dude that deals with statistics and different things, they'd have to figure that out. But the chances are so slim, okay? So it's meant to run all the time. Yeah, so that's just an interesting question that I get from people. So, or that I've had a few times. But I actually had a customer tell me that at a bar one time. So I was like, what? You don't leave your ice machine? No, because I had a friend that told me that they had a friend that their ice machine burnt down their restaurant. It's like, no, that's not going to happen, dude. So I already answered that question. So let's talk about this hardest service call. So what is my hardest service call? Well, typically, let's talk about this for a sec. A hard or a difficult service call, in my experience, tends to be when it's all said and done, once you figure everything out. Those calls become, in my mind, the most memorable calls. And I typically, in looking back on those seem to be some of the best times in my career, because typically if it's a really difficult service call and I can't figure it out, it means I'm being challenged and I really got to stop and think, and I may not be able to fix it as fast as I normally do. Okay. You know, again, I'm not bragging. I just have experience and I've made a lot of mistakes. Okay. That's just something, that I know. But as far as my hardest service call, I mean, it would be an interesting one. There's going to be a whole bunch of them, but one of my favorites, I actually have footage of, and it was a really, really fun service call. Okay. So in the middle of COVID, when the lockdowns were still going on and, restaurants were only allowed to serve food to go, all this different stuff. One of the restaurant chains that I do work for, there wasn't a lot of service calls, and the people at the corporate office, they're really cool. I've worked with that company for a very long time. And the person at the corporate office that decides who the service companies are, well, that particular person or persons decided that during COVID, because I was very slow and we didn't have a lot of work, they started giving us work outside of our service area. Of course, we made them understand something. Hey, you know what? I can't continue to serve this when the lockdown's over because I can't get out to that location. I can't service it. But during COVID, I was willing because I wanted to stay busy and keep my guys moving. So I took a service call at one of the locations that I don't service. I walked into it and it was a walk-in freezer not working. Okay, I have a video of this. It's one of my more popular videos on my channel. So I went into the service call, walk-in freezer, manager says, the other company that normally comes here, they've been here, and she said, like, I kid you not, 10, 12 times or something like that. And she goes, I have invoices for these last, however many times they were here. It's insane. They can't figure out what's going on with this walk-in freezer. And it just kept icing up. And when I started it, to paraphrase, you guys go find the video. The other company couldn't figure this one out either, I think, or something like that. I don't know. It was a walk-in freezer one, but it was the silliest thing, like the silliest thing. But I had to backwards work my way through from looking at their invoices, trying to undo all the stuff that they had done. Because again, going back to how I answered something earlier, the technicians that were coming out, you could clearly tell, did not understand how those systems work. And the technician that did the install did not understand how that particular walk-in freezer piece of equipment worked. It actually happened to be a Heatcraft QRC walk-in freezer. So now they have their intelligent technology. It was the previous technology to that. It was an electronic circuit board, all this different stuff. And the previous company had such a hard time. They kept going out on this. They changed 2 evaporator fan motors, maybe 3. They changed circuit boards, transducers. Like, there was just so many things that they had done. They had changed. They had, oh my gosh, it was insane. They had electricians come in and do stuff, and they couldn't figure it out. The equipment kept icing up, and it just kept burning up the fan motors, and the customer was pissed, but I don't even know. They kept billing the customer, and the customer kept paying the bills. It was so insane. And they called me in there on a Friday night. I was frustrated because I was supposed to be on the HVAC overtime show, and I wasn't able to be on there. So I was like calling in, talking to the guys every few minutes while they were there, and I was troubleshooting. And what I found was the silliest thing. And I'm going to spoil it right now if you haven't seen the video, but trust me, go watch it anyways. What I found, the reason why it kept icing up was because when the installer installed the equipment, he didn't realize that the drain line coming out the wall, as it exited the coil, it goes straight into a wall. So as it was coming out the wall, he had used the drain line from the previous evaporator coil, and the slope on it wasn't correct. So when he hooked it up to the new evaporator coil, it pushed up on the middle of the drain pan about 1/2 inch, just enough that when the defrost happened, not all the water would drain out because it was pushed up in the middle. So therefore the rest of the pan would sit, and water would sit in there. It wasn't blocking off all the water though. So when it would defrost, some water would come out of the drain, but not all of it. So when it would go back into a freeze mode, that water started to build up and build up, and it turned into thick things of ice, and it went up to the coil and it burnt out the motors. And because of that silly drain, they had thousands and thousands of dollars in service calls at that location. And it was so interesting to find that it was something that simple that that customer had been paying that company for. So that was one of my hardest service calls, but it was also one of the best because figuring it out. And there was so many things like that have happened in my career before YouTube, and I don't have them filmed. Guys, I have some of the cool stories of weird service calls. I should start doing that, like some kind of a segment where I talk about an interesting service call before YouTube. But it was so cool that I was able to film that and get it all on film. And it's one of my more popular videos, so it's kind of fun. So that would probably be one of my hardest service calls. Let's see what else we got going on in the chat. Need to know your sequence of operation. 100%. Yep. Let me see. Reading through the chat, seeing what I'm missing. Let's see. Go to the... yeah. I almost read that one last guy. And I was like, nope, not going to read that on the air. Let's see. Joke walk by the ice machine. Give it an old vanilla ice treatment. Yeah, rolling in the 5.0. Man, that is... Oh, man. What was that movie called? Oh, gosh. There's a vanilla ice movie. Oh, man. Yeah, anyways, that's a whole nother thing. See, I'm going off on a tangent. See, you guys in the chat, you guys get me confused, and I start going down there. If you guys haven't already, I released this last week a first video. I've never done something like this, and I knew that the video was not going to do as good as usual because it was not my normal format, but it was something fun that I might do something with, right? I kind of released a podcast, but it was a video podcast, okay? It was an interview. I recently went back to Stone Mountain, Georgia, and went to Heatcraft Refrigeration's headquarters in Stone Mountain, and was able to work with a bunch of their really awesome product managers, training managers, engineering people, customer service people. I got to interview a bunch of the guys, and I got to see their facility and see their research and development lab. And so anyways, I released my first video. It was an interview with Mr. Don Fort, a really cool person from Heatcraft Refrigeration. Don is one of the better trainers out there. He's a really awesome dude, really nice, down to earth guy too. Just a very, very cool individual, but it was cool. So if you guys haven't seen it, go on my channel. It was Sunday's video. I think I called it the Heatcraft Sessions, and it was really cool. So check it out. I'm kind of proud of that. It was something fun. You know, who knows? I may end up putting it on a podcast format too. Thought about that a lot lately too. Again, going back to, this is just me. Like, that's the problem. I have a million ideas, guys. I have this folder in my phone with all these ideas of things that I really want to do, and I just can't do anything because I'm so busy and I have so much going on. And everything takes my time. You know, my refrigeration business struggles because I focus on this, and then this struggles because I focus on that. It's a balance. And then my family struggles, and so I'm trying. If you guys know anybody that wants to help with the channel, if you know people that are like legitimately qualified for something like that, whether it be, you know, I already have the IT side of things going for the most part. I have a lot of friends that help me out with the computer stuff. My buddy Ike, and you know, we have a Discord server. I'll find the link for the Discord server here. Hold on. So yeah, there's a Discord server. And anyways, but I'm looking for all kinds of help. I mean, if someone really, really fits what it should, you know, what I need, I'd definitely be willing to work with someone if, you know, they can help me. But it can't be someone that just wants to wing it. Like, I need people that I can just be like, all right, do this and be done with it, you know? I'm going to post the Discord link right now here. Hold on. Here we go. Control V. Ooh, see, this is what I got to do. I got to delete that part. All right, so I'm going to post the Discord link if you guys are interested. There's a bunch of guys in there, and they follow the channel, but then they also like they like to help me with my computer stuff, and it's a really cool little server. It's just like a giant chat room, so check it out. All right. See what else we got going on in here. This video is brought to you by Heat Piece, or is it Fieldcraft, or, well, 8% in True Tech Tools. Yep, that's right. Got to make fun of it. It is really cool, and I know you're just joking, Jason. But it is really cool, though, to be able to work with some of the manufacturers I get to work with. It's a lot of fun because I get to talk to people. Like, for instance, you know, something that's been fun in the past, Field Piece. I have been part of their beta testing program for many years, even technically before the videos. I was part of their beta testing program where, you know, they would take insight. That's something cool that Field Piece does, is they have a beta testing program where, you know, they send it out to multiple technicians. They all have communication with each other, and you get to help design tools. It's a fun thing. But I've been afforded the opportunity to work with Heatcraft Refrigeration and go see their R&D lab and things that I normally wouldn't be able to do. So I'm very humbled by this all. And thank you, everybody out there that affords me the ability to be able to do this, because you guys, you know, watch the videos. It's awesome because then I can share the content and you guys get a window into everything too, you know? So it is really awesome. And I hope that I deliver some sort of a value to you guys when I do get to do this stuff. So, all right. Let's see what else we got going on in the chat. They have some new subs last quarter. Okay, cool. Who's going to be running the OnlyFans? I don't know. You know, my wife told me I'm not allowed to have one of those, even though I literally would just... Actually, someone already got my idea. So apparently I've been told that there is someone on there that just literally posts pictures of fans. That was my idea. I was going to be, from the HVAC perspective, just showing pictures of fans on my OnlyFans. And I thought it would be the most epic troll. Like, come on, that's a great one. Field Piece needs a combustible leak detector. You mean you want it to catch on fire and burn it? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, combustible refrigerant leak detector. Yeah, that is something that I've mentioned to Field Piece. I do not have confirmation if they're doing anything. I would only think that they would be doing something with that for sure, because that is the future. But yeah, we definitely need one. The only two that I really know of that are of any quality or worth mentioning that I know of is the DTEC Stratus. You can buy a combustible gas module for it or sensor for it. And Infocon also has their GasMate. And I have the GasMate. I got to be frank, though. I'm not a fan of the GasMate by Infocon. It's just not a... It just doesn't seem to be very high quality, but it works. I mean, it does its job. It is not my favorite leak detector, though, by far. Let me see. Only cans, but we post bean cans from hydronic systems. Oh, I thought you meant like literally bean cans full of beans, like hobos sitting around the campfire eating can of beans. That's what I thought you meant there, Alaska. GasMate, there you go, yeah. All right, let's see. How is it that I know so much about air conditioning and refrigeration? You want to know the secret? I don't know very much about air conditioning and refrigeration. The secret is that the little bit of knowledge that I do have, majority of it is because I made a lot of mistakes and I learned from those mistakes. You know, I'm sure that there's people in the chat that have been in the industry longer than me. I've been in the industry 21 something years or something like that, or I don't know officially, but I mean, I grew up in the industry too. So I've made a lot of mistakes. I mean, I can remember, I still in my head, and my dad doesn't remember this, but in my head, I have this story of when my dad was so angry with me because I was a little kid. I couldn't have been 7, maybe 10 years old. Okay. And I went to work with them, and I can remember the restaurant. I don't work there anymore, so I can say it was an El Torito restaurant in West Covina, California. And we were on the roof. I don't do their work anymore, so it's safe to talk about it. But I was on the roof, and my dad was working on an air conditioner, and I worked on that later in my career. So I can picture the roof. I can picture the air conditioner. I can picture it, and I can picture being a little kid. And he was testing voltages, okay? It was an older train unit, too, like the BYOC units, or they're old units. But... and he had thermostat wires. He was doing something, and I can't make sense of what he was doing, but I had live thermostat wires, and he had me hold them. And he said, whatever you do... Actually, I think it might have been one wire. It was probably the R wire. I know it was the R wire, okay? So I remember being a small thermostat wire, and he says, hold this unit and don't let it touch any metal, or hold this wire. And I was like, all right. So I'm a kid, and he proceeded to go downstairs. I don't know what he was doing. I cannot understand it because it doesn't make sense to me. But regardless... I had a 24-volt thermostat wire in my hand, and he was telling me, Don't let it touch metal. And as he went down the roof, I remember my mind thinking, well, why not? Why wouldn't I want it to touch metal? Like, what's going to happen? I'm curious. So me as a 10-year-old just thought, okay, let's screw it. Let's see what happens, you know? And the air conditioner stopped working. That's all I know, you know? And then my dad came up, and I knew instantly I felt guilty. And my dad came up, and he's talking. And I go, I'm sorry, it accidentally touched. And he goes, it accidentally touched? Come on, Christopher. What do you mean it accidentally touched? How did it accidentally touch? And I was like, I touched it because I wanted to know what would happen, you know? And I think it ruined the transformer because I remember him yelling at my mom or telling my mom the story, and he was mad because it was a transformer. It's weird things that you remember, but I've made a lot of mistakes in my career. I've learned from the mistakes, and I have valuable knowledge from the mistakes. So I don't know more than the next guy. There's certainly many other people out there. Some people in these comments, really, really smart dudes. Lots of great smart people in these comments. You know, so there's many other people much smarter than I. I just happen to have my experience, my knowledge, and I call it the little bit of knowledge, right? Because I have a little bit of knowledge, and I'm going to share that. And I hope, and I know that there's people in this chat that share their knowledge too. So I don't have more knowledge than anybody, but I just got to this point from making mistakes and learning from myself and from others. So, then I got smacked around a little bit. Yeah, I don't think I really didn't get smacked around, but I definitely heard some things. I got my ass chewed out for sure. So, but yeah, it would be funny, huh? Grabs suction line, grabs Coors Light. Yep, we're good. Let's get lunch. That was it. Jason Johnson, I was taught beer can cold. I was taught pre-EPA laws and different things like that you didn't even vacuum a system down. I can remember being a kid fixing an air conditioner and then just hooking up the refrigerant cylinder and just dumping it in there and keeping your finger on the suction hose, the blue suction hose, right? And just, yep, that's refrigerant. Just purging the system with refrigerant, okay? Like, it's so asinine, the things that I was taught. I was taught to charge a system by adding refrigerant and that your pressure should be at this and this at all times. So, again, I know these numbers because they're ingrained in my brain. When I was charging an R22 package unit, it was a fixed orifice metering device. I was always taught that your head pressure should be 275 psi and your suction pressure should be anywhere from 65 to 70 psi. And so I was taught to add refrigerant until the high side got to 275, and then the suction should be at 65, and it was perfectly charged, okay? Now, I know none of that stuff works, but I learned from that because I thought, that doesn't seem right, you know? So then I started researching, and I started learning. So it was being exposed to the things. So, you know, and my dad taught me that stuff. And was he a bad person for doing those kind of things? I don't think so, because that's where the industry was. The industry, you know, that was pretty standard across the board because also the equipment was very forgiving. So, yeah, was my dad doing things incorrectly? Sure, you know, but guess what? I learned from them and I grew the company and changed the company to the point that we try to do the best that we can. But there's things that I'm sure I do wrong too. So we're always going to be evolving. Read through the chat, see what I'm missing here. Mistakes are opportunities to learn. If you don't learn, they are just mistakes. That is 100% true. Very, very good point. All right. So, multiplex confusion. In my last 2 videos ago, I did a refrigeration repair, and I titled the thumbnail Multiplex Refrigeration System. And you wouldn't be surprised, I got probably about 6 comments from people, maybe 8, saying I thought he was going to make a Manitowoc ice machine multiplex system video. Okay, they have a thing called a multiplex system that Manitowoc owns, and it chills beverage lines. Okay, it's a little different, and it's kind of like a glycol system in a way, but for beverage lines. But no, I don't know why Manitowoc or whoever invented that system. Manitowoc probably just bought it, but I don't know why they called it the multiplex system, because multiplex is just a term meaning that in refrigeration that you have one condensing unit with multiple evaporators with multiple circuits. That's all that multiplex means. So I didn't mean that I was working on a multiplex system. I was using the general term that I was working on a multiplex refrigeration system, meaning that we had one condensing unit, a waitress region with 2 coils and then 2 separate bar units with a coil in each one of those, and it was just all controlled off of one condensing unit. So that was one thing that everybody was confused about. And another thing too that I get, and it's very interesting, is I get a lot of European commenters especially that are very surprised with the way that we do things here in the United States and how we are not ahead of the game when it comes to environmental concerns and restrictions. And while we in the United States oftentimes are upset because, you know, we have to deal with this new EPA rule and it's making us spend more money and blah, 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 and all these different complaints, right? And I complain them too, just the same. But in European countries, they're far ahead of us with regulations where we're just getting started with, what is it? What's the new A2L refrigerant that, it's a 400 series refrigerant. It's an A2L that they're going to, I can't think of it right now, but anyways, it's a 400 series one. What is it? It's bugging me right now. 454B. No, not that one. R32. Sorry, it's not a 400. Sorry. R32 is a new refrigerant that Daikin's been talking about using, and that's going to be one of the new refrigerants that we're going to for, you know, comfort cooling and different things. There's a couple other ones too that Carrier's doing. But regardless, the European countries are already talking about phasing that R32 out. It's in the talks right now, right? So we're way behind. We're just getting started with that refrigerant, and we'll use it for another 5 or 6 years, and then they'll phase that out and they'll come out with something new. But it's interesting because one of the more common complaints, or not complaints, but just comments I get from the European viewers is that they are so blown away that I would just go out to a refrigeration system, top off the charge, and then order equipment and come back and fix it, but leave it leaking. We're allowed to do that here in the United States. And while, yeah, I guess it's not as great for the environment because technically it's leaking out. I mean, there's a lot of complaints. I can't just be the only business to not top off refrigerants anymore. Like, you have to find a fine balance. So if I just can't stand up on a high horse and say I'm never going to top off refrigerants again, because all my competitors will, and they'll get them going, and they'll be that go-to company. So it's a fine line of wanting to have a successful business. Now, I'm not going to just keep dumping gas for years and years and years. I'm going to, of course, hold my customers accountable and make sure that they're going to repair the equipment. But in the meantime, when I have a refrigeration system down that has a refrigerant leak, I'm going to put gas in it until we get an approval or until we get the equipment, so that way we can replace it. We're going to keep the equipment operating. It's just, the sad truth is that's something that's allowed here in the United States. So therefore, we're going to continue to do it until there's rules that say we can't. You know, I can't be the only person to not top off refrigerants because I wouldn't stay successful in business. Let me see. Carrier's using 454B. Yeah, that's correct. So, because America, damn it. Yeah. Let me see. I'm reading through the chat right now. How do you set your times on defrost timers? Is it the same for coolers and freezers? Mr. Green. Something that I want to bring up with the defrost timers before I forget, and I'll get to yours too, Mr. Green. Graslin makes a defrost timer. If any of you guys works in the restaurant refrigeration side and you work on Hvacr regions or Delfield regions, oftentimes they will have a little white Graslin defrost module, which is one part of an entire defrost clock. It's just the module. For those techs that don't know this, I know I've said this in my videos, but Manitowoc I know for, or Delfield for sure, and Hvacr for sure when they had the defrost timers, although Hvacr's not really making equipment with defrost timers anymore. But regardless, they have a special Graslin defrost timer, okay? It's a module, and if you look on the back of it, if the model number of the module starts with a Q, as in quality, TUZ, that timer has a battery backup. A lot of people don't realize this. If the model number on that clock starts with an STUZ, SAM TUZ, that means it does not have a battery backup. So with that being said, public service announcement. If you're working on a Delfield cooler and you plug it in and you let it sit and you set the time, if they unplug that cooler, it will not lose its time, okay? But if it loses its time, then that indicates that the timer is going bad. So on the STUZ ones, they don't have that battery backup, so if you unplug it. So your question reminded me of that, so I wanted to bring that up. But anyways, Mr. Green, how do I set my times on defrost timers for coolers and freezers? Like, what's the strategy? Okay, this is going to be regionally dependent on your weather and different things, I guess. I don't know. That's kind of a weird way to say that. But we don't have humidity here in Southern California, so we can get away on a standard walk-in freezer system with 4 defrosts a day, 28-minute defrosts, and we're good to go, okay? But if you go to real high humid climates, they may need to change it, okay? So on walk-in freezers, I like to see 4 30-minute defrosts is typically what I see if we have a standard conventional defrost system. On walk-in coolers, I mean, you know, you can get away with 4 to 6. Sometimes you have to do more. It just depends on the customer and how they use the equipment. If they're using the walk-in cooler as a reach-in cooler and they're opening the door 150, 200 times a day, then you're going to have more defrost. But if it's just a standard place that they just get boxes every couple hours from or something like that, you can reduce the defrost. But you're going to want some. So I typically like to see a minimum of 4 defrosts on everything, and then you adjust accordingly more depending on, you know, how the customer uses the equipment. See what else we got in the chat. What am I missing? Christopher Kelly, thank you very much for that super chat, man. That was really appreciated. You guys don't need to do those, but I really do appreciate them. They do help out, so thank you so very much. And the same goes to all my channel supporters, whether you simply, and the easiest way to support this channel is just watch the videos. You guys are supporters by just simply watching the videos, okay? There's a few things you can do when you're watching the videos. I'm technically not supposed to talk about them, so I'm not going to go there. If anybody knows in the comments, you can mention it. You guys can follow in there. But I technically can't say it because it violates YouTube's terms of service. But when you're watching the video, just watch it, okay? But with that being said, thank you for the super chat, and thank you for all my channel supporters, okay? So Christopher Kelly's question, your nephew will be graduating from a vocational HVAC program next year. What is some gear that you could get him that would be useful and beneficial that won't break the bank? Christopher Kelly, very, very good question. First off, I'm going to mention a couple things, but Christopher Kelly, please send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. I would love to talk to you more about this, and I'm sure I can give you a lengthier response in there, okay? But some quick things. As a new technician entering the industry, I'm going to be very broad with this question. I'm going to kind of address a few other things too, Christopher, okay? When you are entering this industry, I encourage everybody out there, you typically need, as a new service technician, basic hand tools, okay? Everybody's going to need hand tools of some sort, but I caution you very much to don't just go blow your wad on a toolkit from Lowe's or a toolkit from Home Depot, because you're going to have a lot of stuff that you don't need in those too, okay? Reach out to content creators, and again, I need to do better at these videos because a lot of people have asked me to do this, but there's a lot of content creators that will have videos saying, like, this is the basic loadout for your tools that you should have as a technician, okay? So there is content out there. I don't have any, but I should probably make it. But basic hand tools are all that I'm going to want people to buy at the get-go, because depending on where you are in the country and what company you're going to work for, a lot of the times the companies provide all the tools. So if, you know, you go and buy all these vacuum pumps and recovery machines because the trade school said you're going to need them, and then you go to work for someone and they provide everything, that stuff's just going to sit, okay? So find out the kind of work your nephew's going to do. Find out what kind of a company he's going to work for. Find out, if you can, what kind of stuff they provide. Once you know that, then you can go out there. But must for a technician in general, and I know there's going to be haters out there, but a good set of digital gauges, not just probes, digital gauges, okay? A good set of digital gauges. I do appreciate the fact that a lot of people think that compound gauges, standard old analog gauges, are the best. And there's like 1 or 2 instances where I do appreciate having standard compound gauges, but every other instance, I really appreciate digital gauges. You need a good, high-quality set of digital gauges is something every technician should have. I prefer, myself, the Field Piece S-Man manifolds. They are my favorite, but hey, there's guys out there that live by Testo. Testo's another digital gauge manufacturer, and they love their products. So I'm more of a Field Piece person. A good set of digital gauges, a good cordless grill is more than likely, or cordless drill is more than likely going to be required. Be careful about impact sets for new guys, like impact drills, because nobody knows how to use the trigger on those. That's a whole nother topic for another day. But please send me an email, Christopher Kelly, and I will answer this some more. But all right, see what else. Having a tool account is the way to go. You see, I use field piece instead of flute. Can you explain why? Oscar, so why, my first meter was a fluke meter, okay? And I went to the fluke side, right? And I think my second meter was a fluke meter, but by the time I was filming videos, I was a good, I don't know, 10 years into my career, 15 years into my career, and I have graduated to field piece meters, okay? And the reason why, there's a lot of reasons, but they were sexy, right? They had appeal. They were cool looking. And at the time, the owner's son of Field Piece Instruments, Russ, would make YouTube videos because he was the marketing person for Field Piece at the time. And so that's when YouTube was happening, and I was really interested in these videos, and they were really cool, and I liked them, and the meters looked really cool. And then I saw a video with Jim Bergman using some of the Field Piece products because he owned TrueTech Tools, or a portion of it at that time. So honestly, it was the marketing that got me into the Field Piece meters. But then once I got them, I realized that they work perfect for what we do, and they were tailored for HVAC technicians. You know, things that you'd have to buy like crazy expensive fluke meters for that just don't make sense to spend that much money. You could all have all this stuff in one Field Piece meter, and it was a quality meter. And then Field Piece really stepped up their game, and their warranty just turned into the most amazing thing. I mean, they stand behind their products. Now, there's some changes going on at Field Piece, and I will say that, you know, I've seen complaints. I personally haven't experienced any of this stuff, but I've seen people out there complaining that the warranty process isn't as great anymore. But then I've seen equal posts saying it was great for them. So I don't know. I mean, the marketing, and then I liked what they had, and then their warranty has kept me, and so I've always been a Field Piece person. I have fluke meters. I mean, I have a fluke meter right here. That's awesome. It's a bench meter. It's amazing, you know? This is a really nice bench meter. This is the 233 with the remote display. Whoa, that was technology, right? And it has a remote display, and you could put this somewhere and you could have the meter down. Like, that was technology. But this is a bench meter, you know, like, I don't know. I just liked the Field Piece stuff, you know, but this right here, you know, if you're going into high-end scientific type stuff, yeah, you're going to need a high-end fluke. Okay. Field Piece isn't going to be out there making high-end, super complicated meters. Okay. But they make meters that work for the HVAC industry, and they're rugged. They work, they're accurate for what I need. They work for me. So that's why I use Field Piece, really. See what we got going on in the chat. Is the stream almost over? Yeah, it pretty much is. Let me see. I'm reading in here. Oh, cool. Right on. Well, thank you very much for that super chat, Henrik. You know, that's really awesome. So, having a tool account is the way to go. Yep, that's right. Buy him an Oxy acetylene torch. How often do I feel rushed at jobs? Dale Marr. Honestly, my entire life, I feel rushed. I am a very high stress, high anxiety, person. So I'm always feeling rushed. Whenever I'm thinking I'm doing a job, I'm thinking 10 steps ahead, and I'm running the job in my head, and I'm managing multiple people, and I'm making sure they're doing their job. And it's just like, so I'm always high stress. So, yeah, let's see what else. So that's what I'm saying. I think I feel in the restaurant industry too, Dale, is pretty high stress. You know, they need stuff fixed. They only need you there in a short period of time. You only have so much time to fix it. Then the cooks are in your way. It's a pretty high stress situation. All right. I really, really, appreciate you all. And, Alaska says he's always a CBD gummy stress person. Yeah, definitely, if it helps, man. Helps with me for sure. So, all right, well, I'm going to wrap this up. I really, really do appreciate you guys. It is so awesome to see all of you guys showing up, and the support that you guys give me is really awesome. I'm just so thankful for that. You know, it's really cool. So thank you so very much. I'm going to cue up the outro music, and we will catch you on the next one.